Helmand Province, 2009. Inside a room, one of the first MARSOC raiders in Afghanistan loses the one thing a rifle needs: space. The door frame traps his barrel before he can bring it back online. A man stands about 1.8 meters away and still closes the gap. There is no angle to lift the rifle and no time to step off the wall. His hand drops to the pistol on his hip. Most American troops carried the Beretta M9 by then, and across the wider force that choice made sense. For 24 years, the military had kept its official sidearm in 9mm under the NATO standard. This Marine draws a .45 instead. The frame under his hand goes back to a design from 1911. That choice did not come from nostalgia. It came from an older lesson the Army had already learned. A pistol can hit a man and still fail to stop him. The room only makes that old calculation visible again. He fires, and the threat stops. Then the question leaves Helmand and moves to a decision made long before this door ever trapped his rifle. The answer starts earlier. In 1985, the United States military retired the M1911A1. It chose the Beretta M92 FS and gave it the designation M9. Across much of the Western Alliance, the same cartridge had already become the common service round. 9mm Parabellum was a serious service cartridge. Tradition did not decide it. The M9 carried 15 rounds. The older pistol carried 7. Lower recoil also meant faster return to the sights and steadier shot placement across troops with very different levels of training. Capacity mattered more than heritage. For an army measured in hundreds of thousands, that counted. The choice fit a general-issue pistol for ordinary troops, not a niche weapon for rare, close rooms. NATO already used the same 9mm round, so American units and Allied units could share pistol ammunition instead of feeding two separate supply lines. Supply had to stay simple. The M9 also passed the Joint Services Small Arms trials. It entered service as an accurate, reliable, ergonomic pistol that soldiers could maintain more easily in the field. That logic fit the map they expected. In Europe, planners pictured Warsaw-packed armor driving through the Fulda Gap after fighting opened at artillery range. Ordinary units trained for that war for a generation. The pistol came last. Usually, it stayed holstered. At that point, capacity and shared Allied ammunition mattered more than the effect of one round. That war never started. The war that followed shoved the pistol back into tight rooms at close range. This lesson had a cost. A different campaign had exposed it decades earlier, in the southern Philippines, long before the 1985 pistol debate began. From 1899 to 1913, American troops fought Moro insurgents at close range. Many Moro fighters were Muslims, and they built their attacks around close combat. Contemporary reports were blunt. Some described fighters binding their torsos before attacks, while the 38 long Colt rounds still failed to stop the charge. Soldiers kept firing. The bullet passed through, but it often could not halt a man already driving forward with a blade. Men died in those seconds because the revolver round pierced flesh without stopping the attack. They emptied revolvers into men who stayed upright, and in 1904, the Army handed Colonel John Thompson the caliber problem. That failure forced a formal answer. In 1904, the U.S. Army sent Colonel John Thompson and Colonel LaGarde to test handgun cartridges against measurable stopping thresholds. They fired available military rounds into cadavers and live cattle. The point was simple: find the smallest bore that could stop a determined attacker. Their report drew a line. A military pistol needed at least .45 caliber for reliable stopping. John Browning built the cartridge first, then the pistol around it. The M1911 entered service in 1911. It stayed in American service for 74 years, through 2 world wars, Korea and Vietnam. That span mattered. Different wars produced the same demand at close range. Then, in 1985, the U.S. Army dropped the M1911 from its main sidearm choice. That procurement turn left one combat problem outside the formal checklist. NATO pressure was real, and the new sidearm debate followed alliance standards and Warsaw-pact battle models. But those models did not center the instant of close contact with a determined opponent. They did not weigh the moment when a second shot might not come. The procurement process looked past that test. For Force Recon, the gap stayed open. They kept the 45 ACP task alive. From the late 1980s, Marine armorers and specialized programs answered it with benches and files. They hand-built M1911 pattern pistols for reconnaissance operators, one sidearm at a time. These were not issue pistols pulled from a crate and passed down the line. Armorers fitted barrel and slide by hand, tightened clearances, installed a match barrel, and added tritium night sights. They also beveled the magazine well, because reloads under stress had to stay fast and clean. They built to tolerances no factory contract was going to promise across general issue production. This was hand labor for a narrow mission. Each pistol consumed roughly 40 hours of skilled work, which meant a full work week for one sidearm. Not because the Marines had time to spare, but because the mission did not forgive a merely adequate pistol. The Corps designated them MEU-SOC, short for Marine Expeditionary Unit, Special Operations Capable. Every one of them stayed in 45 ACP because that cartridge served a specific entry problem. Magazine capacity, recoil control, and alliance logistics still favored 9mm on paper. At about 3 meters, those arguments dropped behind the immediate task. The door breaks open, the threat is already there, and the first round from the pistol on the thigh has to stop the fight before it closes. That close-range job drove the next decision. When the Marine Corps created MARSOC in February 2006, Force Recon Marines formed its core. They brought nearly 2 decades of hand-built M1911 pistols in 45 ACP. That experience stayed. In 2012, the Corps turned that field judgment into procurement and adopted the Colt M45A1 for tight room fighting. Colt built a factory M1911 pattern pistol in 45 ACP. It had a light rail. It wore brownite. More than 15 years of MEU-SOC use set the standard behind it. Most units chose 9mm. Much of SOCOM did too, but MARSOC kept the round, and the pistol its Marines trusted at contact distance. The paperwork came later. Fallujah had already tested the logic, room by room. Proof had arrived, under orders, on November 7, 2004, when Force Recon went into Fallujah with the assault. Operation Phantom Fury drove 10,000 coalition troops into the city, including United States Marines, United States Army units, and Iraqi security forces. Fallujah stood west of Baghdad on the Euphrates, inside a tight grid of residential compounds and commercial buildings, and defenders had spent months turning them into prepared positions. 15 months later, many of those same Marines formed the core of MARSOC. But here, they entered with years of close-quarters habits already behind them. They carried 45 ACP. Then the streets narrowed, the doors opened, and Force Recon followed the fight inside the buildings. Once the fight moved inside, the walls became the next obstacle. Defenders had cut holes through shared walls, linking separate houses into fighting positions, and letting men move from room to room without stepping into the street. No open crossing. In Jolan, the city's oldest district, lanes sometimes barely fit 2 men side by side, and the compounds turned into chained courtyards, rooms, and wall openings built to cancel the reach of a long gun. Each room fed the next. Most wall holes were no wider than a man's shoulders, so every turn forced the body straight, and every entry tightened the weapon against the frame. Space collapsed. A rifle lost shape there. Its barrel struck the door frame before the shooter could settle it, and the buttstock caught on the threshold as he tried to clear the room. At that instant, the long barrel hits the frame, and the .45 comes out of the holster. That snag at the entrance changed the next decision. In rooms that closed the distance to about 2 meters 40, the sidearm mattered more than the long gun. The .45 came out clean and aligned fast at near contact range. Force Recon trusted it in Fallujah for one reason. It was built for a close shot on a man still moving. That edge came from the cartridge, not nostalgia. The .45 projectile was much wider than a 9mm, and American troops had to use full metal jacket ammunition. Police reports that boosted 9mm came from expanding bullets. Fallujah did not offer that option. On equal ammunition, at roughly 2 meters 40, The .45 kept an advantage over the M9. That edge came from the ammunition rule. Treaty limits kept American troops on full metal jacket rounds, even while 9mm built its early 2000s reputation on police use of expanding bullets. Those police rounds dumped energy differently and cut a wound track that service ammunition could not match. In Fallujah, American troops did not get that version. They carried the same ammunition category the 1985 procurement review had judged, and that review answered a different battlefield question. Inside rooms, the old 1904 case for the .45 still held. Force Recon came home with that lesson fixed in memory and training. 15 months later, MARSOC stood up, and that close-range lesson went in with it. The M45A, won in 2012, did not honor nostalgia. It fixed Force Recon's Fallujah lesson in a sidearm, while the M9 still answered a different Army problem. That split mattered because the older decision served a larger Army, not a small team entering rooms. The M9 was the American version of the Beretta 92 FS, adopted in 1985. 15 rounds fit inside. Recoil was softer, training moved faster, and Allied supply got simpler. Those gains were real. In line units and standard fights, they improved the whole force. That promise held. Fallujah shifted the fight into close rooms, where old requirements no longer matched the job. By then, the M9 era belonged to an earlier kind of combat. That gap forced a new decision. In 2017, the Army chose the Sig Sauer P320 for its modular handgun program. The old M9 stayed behind. The new pistol later took the names M17 and M18. The brief changed with it. Planners wanted a grip that fit more hands, better practical accuracy, and support for modern 9mm expanding loads. American troops in Fallujah had not had those loads. The P320 also used a removable trigger unit, so the weapon itself changed with the requirement. That is the key point. 32 years after retiring the M1911, the Army reached the same standard Marine Raiders had kept. It did not return to .45 ACP. It kept 9mm and rebuilt the pistol and the ammunition around it. MARSOC moved the same way, fielding the Glock 19 beside the M45A1. The physics of the round stayed the same. The pistol and the load around it changed. That left one holdout. Marine Raiders kept .45 ACP longer because their fight still matched the old test. In 1904, Thompson-LaGarde defined the problem first. A military pistol had to stop a determined enemy at close range. The Hague Declaration came in 1899. Expanding bullets were barred, so the answer had to work with full metal jacket ammunition. America adopted the M1911 in 1911, and that standard-shaped pistol choice for 74 years. Then, alliance compatibility and procurement priorities pulled the larger force toward 9mm. Raiders waited longer. They fought inside buildings, across short rooms, with the same legal ammunition limits still in place. The gap stayed open. 2 decades of war and a generation of ballistic research pushed modern 9mm close to that older standard. By then, newer ammunition had narrowed the old deficit. One test still remained, a room with roughly 2.5 meters to the target. FMJ, or full metal jacket, stayed tied to military use for decades under Hague restrictions, yet it could leave too little immediate effect. A man already committed to reaching the shooter could still keep moving. Marine Raiders of MARSOC fought in buildings, saw that limit up close, and kept the .45 ACP from service experience, not sentiment. They were the last major American military community to stop acting on what FMJ in rooms had taught them.